I'm Ryan O'Sullivan. I manage some of our strategic accounts over here at Introhive. Been here for getting on for 5 years, and I often say I found my philosophical home with Introhive, a firm that really focuses on leveraging and understanding and measuring the quality of relationships. Something that I hold very dear to my heart. Spent 7 years researching that for my doctorate. And it's a real pleasure for me today to work here and introduce Heidi and Ivan. I got my hands on their book about 6 months or so ago, right from chapter one, which is the business case for collaboration. It's something that I've been looking for a while. It was packed full of quantitative data, dollar signs around how collaboration and leveraging relationships can have an impact on your business. I found it fascinating. I've since had the opportunity to do a number of joint client meetings with Heidi and Ivan, and I think a few people on the call today have been lucky enough to see them in action live on our client summits in New York and London. So a real pleasure, as I say. So I'll hand over to Heidi and Ivan to introduce themselves and give a bit of context for today.
Fantastic, Ryan. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you here. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to bring you some of the ideas of smarter collaboration. I'll introduce myself, and Ivan will hand over and really kick off the content here. I'm Dr. Heidi Gardner. I'm a distinguished fellow at Harvard University. I teach executives at both the business school and the law school at Harvard. So people probably just like you who are experienced and advanced in their careers and want to take leadership and collaboration to the next level. Outside of Harvard, I'm a CEO of Gardner & Co. It is our research and consulting business where we advise leaders of organizations around the globe on how to embed the principles and practices of smarter collaboration.
Thanks, Heidi. And I'm Ivan Matviak. I am CEO of Smarter Collaboration International, which is the technology arm of our business. Heidi and I have done a lot of writing together. We co-authored the most recent book, Smarter Collaboration, and have done a lot of Harvard Business Review articles and other research on the topics and concepts of smarter collaboration. So why don't we dive in and start talking about the necessity of smarter collaboration? Why is it becoming such a hot topic? And what we see really are two trends that are clashing together. The first is that we're all becoming more specialized in what we do. We can't be expert at everything. So out of necessity, we are all picking where we want to go deep, where we want to be experts in our field and seen in the market as really differentiated and experts in our domain. And almost by definition, as we go deep, we also get narrower. We really have to focus our attention. The challenge is that the problems that we're dealing with are increasingly VUCA. Now, maybe some of you know this term. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. These are the big, hairy, multifaceted challenges that we and our clients are all facing. I almost guarantee you that your clients are feeling this strain of these VUCA challenges even today. They're wondering, where's the next crisis going to come from? Is it an economic challenge? Is it the rapidly changing global political landscape? Is it social unrest? They're wrestling with so many different issues. And the problem is that these big VUCA challenges can't be solved by individuals with narrow expertise. The only way to square this circle, the only way to really address these big complex challenges and opportunities within our clients is by getting people with different expertise to work together, bringing together different points of view, different perspectives, different backgrounds, different expertise, different styles to really come at problems from various directions and think about creative solutions for them. And we also have to create an environment where people are comfortable bringing that expertise, where they can feel that it's okay to debate and challenge and have a different point of view and to have, unique perspectives that other people in the room maybe don't have. Because it's only when you have that kind of environment where people are comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations that you really start to crack some of these problems. And that's what we call smarter collaboration. It's really integrating this specialized knowledge to tackle a more complex problem than any of us could do on our own.
100%. And Ivan, picking up on something you just said there, it's not just about having the right people in the room. It's about creating that context where they are motivated to contribute, where they do contribute, and where their contributions are valued and used. All of that means that people are optimizing the full potential of the resources they've got around the table. But Ryan's getting antsy because he's like, show me the money, because he really likes the business case for all of this. So are clients just saying, end users of this, are they really saying, oh, yes, we love it when we have a collaborative team serving us, but, at the end of the day, it's on you to shoulder the burden for doing that, and we're not willing to pay any more for it. If that were the case, we wouldn't be standing in front of you today. There is a real business case behind this. How do we know that? We have now conducted this analysis for dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations around the planet. We focus on professional service firms. So here's what we see. We did an analysis back in 2017. The numbers across the bottom show how many different services in this professional service firm were teaming up to serve clients in a given year. So the green bars here, you see fees that were generated by those clients that were served by just a single service. They were generating 160,000 USD. When clients were served by two services, they generated double than that. And it goes on and builds from there. What you see is in 2017, the firm was basically getting the bare minimum you would expect from each successive service that joined the client service mix. The blue bars, however, show the wow factor. 5 years later, after this firm was intent on embedding the principles and practices of smarter collaboration, look how much more revenue they were generating from clients. So at the bottom end, they doubled that revenue. Some of that, of course, is due to increases in market rates, et cetera. But what you can't explain through macroeconomic factors is how much more value they were generating for clients when they were serving them in this more fulsome way with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different service lines. Let's pause here for just a second. Why are clients willing to pay so much more when they are served by multiple practice groups, service lines, expertise areas? I mean, you could look at this and say, wow, this firm is really pulling one over on their clients. They're billing so much more by layering in so many different services. Does the client know this? Well, yes, clients are sophisticated. They only pay for the value they get. Some of the reasons the clients tell us that they are willing to, in essence, overpay for that 4th practice group, that 6th expertise area, is because almost by definition, once a professional firm is serving them in this bigger, broader, deeper way, that firm is addressing more complex, higher value issues. They're no longer delivering point solutions to a siloed practitioner inside the corporate or inside the bank or inside whatever client organization they're serving. They're making their way up the value chain inside the client, addressing increasingly sophisticated VUCA challenges and opportunities. Now, what we also saw in this analysis is the shape of their client portfolio. So, back in 2017, when we were just starting to work with this firm, they had thousands of clients that they were serving in a monoline way, 2,220 clients in that what some people call the long tail, a bunch of clients that are served in just with a single service. They're generating relatively very little value in terms of revenue for their provider. The provider is providing very little value to them because they're operating in silos. What we see by 2022, however, is they've made a really radical shift. They've cut the number of monoline clients by half. And they've started serving, as you saw earlier, some of their clients with significantly more of their services. And they've managed to get 30 plus clients that they're serving at that high end of the market with the full force of their firm. So let me just pause there for a minute. Any comments from you, Ryan, or any questions from the audience about what this looks like?
Yeah, I'll reiterate what Lauren said to keep the questions flowing as they come. We've had a couple come in. One that's a good question that I'm interested in the answer to as well. That shift, and I'm sure a lot of the clients on the call today would notice this long tail that you talk about there, Heidi. How do clients make that shift to determine which are the clients that they want to focus on and which ones to deprioritize? And what type of conversation would you imagine having with a client when I'm assuming you decide you don't want to work with them anymore, or they're not strategically important? That sounds like a difficult, counterintuitive type of conversation.
Yeah, let me answer it first with what not to do. I'm going to start with two not to do's. One is do not talk about cutting the tail. Obviously, you're not going to talk about that with clients, but don't even talk about it internally. Too many leaders go on a cut the tail exercise, and all it does is focus partners and everyone else in the firm on what they're losing. It's a lousy way to talk about strategic prioritization. Number two, what you don't do is let 1,000 flowers bloom. In other words, don't go out to partners and say, what you really need to migrate your client up this portfolio. Go for it. Right. So what do you do instead? You talk about strategic account prioritization. So think through what makes for a brilliant partner in a client organization. Who do you really want to serve, and who wants to be taking full advantage of what your firm can offer? You know, we do a white space analysis with our clients sometimes and help them understand where they've got gaps. You're not trying to fill in every gap by that wretched cross-selling idea of just, throwing services at them, but taking a step back and understanding sector by sector. We're serving 15 different retail banks. A handful of them are really partnering with us to use our full breadth of expertise. What are some of those other ones missing? And then step back and say, which ones would truly value this? There are some of them there that are probably, on the cusp of asking, why aren't you solving more complex problems? Why aren't you bringing a fuller array of partners to us? Why didn't you let us know that you had a lateral join who now has this great base of expertise? There's some that are really keen for it. And then getting to the last part, there's some that are just like, thanks, but no thanks. You're our fill in the blank provider, right? They're the ones that treat you like a vendor. They're the ones who, shuffle you off to procurement all the time, that negotiate really only on fees and not on strategic priorities. Those are the ones, Ryan, that firms really need to take a hard look at and say, are they the kinds of clients that we want to invest in? If you make the choice that a client is probably not going to face, is probably going to face that cut, they're probably not making the list of where you want to invest in. I think having a reasonably transparent conversation about them that says, based on our experiences with you, we can understand that you're not interested in growing with us across different service lines or across geographies, or however you're thinking about strategically investing. Is this the case, or have we just not done a good job of exposing our offerings to you, of delving in and finding ways to serve you? If they say, nope, stay in your box, you're a vendor, you can say, I'm not sure that this is the best relationship for any of us. Having a grown-up conversation about that and helping them understand what it takes to be a great client is really important. I'm not advocating in the least to be arrogant about this, to quote unquote fire a client, which is language that's hideous that some people use. Not at all, but finding the right fit. And if it's not working for the client, chances are they're not going to shed a huge amount of tears when you make it clear to them that you're not putting them as one of your strategic priorities.
And
it takes me back to my youth and those conversations about it's not you, it's me.
It's not you, it's me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And just building on what Heidi was saying, Ryan, oftentimes these strategic planning conversations and, account assessment conversations start internally by looking at, looking across offerings or practice lines. What are the needs of the client and the segment that they play in? And what capabilities do we have that, when brought together, can start to solve some higher level, more complex challenges at the client? And that takes real coordination internally, right? It takes understanding, bringing together the experts across the service lines, and also understanding where that expertise lies, who has relationships at the client, who can really help open a more strategic door if you're operating below the C-suite level. How do you get up into the CEO, the chief strategy officer, whoever the critical buying persona is, so that you can start to have not a vendor type relationship, but a more strategic relationship about where the client is going and where your organization is going. And I think we talked about that a little bit, Ryan, with one of the tech firms that you've developed a relationship with, and really thinking about how the Introhive data helps figure out who has those relationships within the client.
Yeah, I think it's a good point there, Ivan. If you're looking to prioritize, if you will, which accounts to focus on, I think a good precursor for that is where you have existing relationships across leadership and in the key buying personas across those service lines. So in this scenario here, there's 8 service lines. You can assume there's typical buying personas that you would imagine, and then to do that analysis and be able to then prioritize. And we've certainly helped a number of clients do that, and you've been involved in some of those conversations. I've got another interesting question. I might combine it, but I'll try and paraphrase. How confident are you that this will work and it won't just create sort of the 5 service lines is the average of 5 service lines? So you mentioned the data, the analysis there, Heidi and Ivan. It's going back many years. So that's probably
Ryan,
a question.
I bet my business and my professional reputation on it, so I'm pretty damn confident. But the reason I'm confident is we've seen it work. Right? And we've seen it work from both sides. Not only have we crunched the data to demonstrate the before and after, many, many, many times, but we get out into the field and we do voice of client interviews. Right? So we're talking to our clients' clients. We're talking to chief legal officers. We're talking to buyers of these professional service firms at the really tippy top level, chief level officers. Just yesterday, we were on the phone with one of the world's largest oil and gas companies and their head of strategic transformation, talking to him about what this is like when one of his major service providers engages this way and what it's like with the other ones that don't. So, we have had thousands of those interviews helping to understand how smarter collaboration adds value to the client, which is ultimately what everyone's in business for. All right, so yeah, we're very confident that when partners in professional firms engage with each other in these ways that are proactive and not just responsive to a client, that it adds real value. I guess, on that, sorry, Ivan, just, one last thing on that. We often talk to a bunch of like M&A partners and they say, of course we do this. And on every deal, we bring in tax and employment and IP. That's not the same, right? That's just being responsive to the needs of a deal. It's basically avoiding malpractice. What we are talking about here is getting out in front of the client problems, understanding where those complex, uncertain areas are that are genuinely vexing for the clients, and figuring out how to team up across your different internal silos to deliver those most, highest impact solutions.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head, Heidi. And it just, what this is not is that dreaded word cross-selling. It's not, okay, you're buying service line A. Are you interested in service line B and C? Right. It's really understanding the more strategic challenges at the client and how those service lines can come together in a truly unique way to solve a more complex problem. Because we know when you're solving those more complex problems, those challenges that are front of mind for the CEO or the board, those are higher value problems. That's when you start to get that exponential curve. They're also less price sensitive. Those opportunities tend not to get pushed down to procurement. Those are the ones where the CEO or the CFO or the CTO is the sponsor of the initiative, right? And it's a mission critical opportunity or challenge for them. And that's when you start to really see this uptick in revenue and profitability.
Big time. Okay. Ivan,
Yeah, well, I think look,
Yeah.
that's great, and I'm the timekeeper as well, so maybe be
Can we keep
useful
going?
to move ahead. And I
Absolutely.
notice there's a couple of questions that actually do align to future content. I'll bring those up as we get there.
Okay, great. Well, so we talked a lot about the financial case for smarter collaboration. It clearly has a major impact on revenue, but there are other critical benefits and outcomes of smarter collaboration that go beyond just revenue. One is around profitability, productivity. We know that when people are working together in a smart way, they can be more efficient in their activities. We know that organizations are more innovative when people are able to bring together different perspectives and think out of the box to create new solutions. And we can talk a little bit about some of the research we've done on patent data and what that looks like in terms of the massive shift toward teams driving real innovation as opposed to individuals. It leads to more strategic client relationships because you have more touch points into the organization. You're providing more capabilities. You become a more strategic partner to that client. And there's more efficiency in the organization. I want to pause on this one for a second because I think it's particularly important. When we see organizations collaborating effectively, not only do they have the financial and client outcomes, but they also have major shifts in talent outcomes for the organization. There's a poll that Gallup has been doing for more than 20 years. They have millions and millions of data records. And there's one question that they ask that is more indicative of whether individuals are engaged in the organization than any other. And it's this phrase. At work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. When people say that they are able to bring their best and contribute their unique capabilities, they are more engaged individually, and the teams that they're working in are more engaged. And how is it that people are able to bring their best to do what they do best every day? It's by bringing their expertise. It's not by playing outside their wheelhouse. It's by focusing on what they can really do well, and then working with others who have those complementary skills to really deliver transformative solutions. So that, we see significant benefits in engagement and retention and satisfaction in organizations when people are collaborating effectively. And the last one, which we'll come on to a little bit later, is integration of new hires. It's critical to get new hires collaborating quickly. And we'll come on to that in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating stuff. And it did touch on an answer there to one of the questions we had about the employee experience and the metrics around the impact of that. That was the point there that you highlighted there, Ivan.
Yeah, I mean, just to throw some numbers against it, what we know is when people are engaged in work where they can play to their collaborative strengths, they can really lean into what they do best, and they're able to focus on using those because they're surrounded by people who have complementary bases of knowledge or roles, et cetera. When people are engaged that way in their work, they are much more likely to stay, as Ivan said. And indeed, the organization has 40% higher retention. And we can trace it to not just retaining any old talent, but retaining the people who are most productive, most profitable, and that are driving client service engagement as well.
Let's maybe talk for a second about what that environment feels like. When people have very different perspectives and life experiences and points of view, that can be challenging, right? It's not easy to be in a team where there is that kind of productive conflict, but it's absolutely essential. What you don't want are teams that are just very collegial, where everybody's holding hands and it's a very sort of easy environment because there's no debate or challenge. This kind of smarter collaboration that we're talking about really requires those tough conversations, those tough debates, which can be uncomfortable. And that's a critical role of a leader, is creating an environment where people can have those tough conversations and that challenge and debate, but still feel safe in doing so. They feel like the organization has their back, that different perspectives are valued, that they're really focused, the organization is focused on the issues and getting the best out of the organization and welcomes real debate and challenge, because that's how it raises the level for the entire organization. But it does require an environment that can be uncomfortable sometimes.
For sure. So if collaboration is so great, why aren't we all doing it more? Why does anybody need help on this? What we've done is find out where some of these barriers to collaboration exist. What I will tell you, again, on the not to do, we don't go to the CEO of a company and say, tell us what stands in the way of collaboration. I mean, we actually do that, and then we compare it against what we find when we do research with people at levels, 2, 4, and 6 layers down from the CEO. And we find out, surprise, surprise, those at the top are a little bit out of touch, right? Partly because nobody says no. The CEO wants to collaborate with somebody, and guess what? They all say yes, there aren't any barriers. But also, those people have tremendous networks and support behind them. For, kind of the regular person in a firm or a company, these are typical barriers. Number one, oftentimes the struggle is to find time for this. It's often easier just to crack on and do your small piece of work rather than seeking out bigger challenges and figuring out whom to work with and how. So time pressure can be a huge issue for people. And the structure and the incentive system are usually close behind. We all know that there's no perfect compensation system to drive collaboration. People come to us and ask that all the time. If anybody says they've got a surefire way to use compensation to drive collaboration, I'd really put on my skeptical hat, because what we generally find is the best compensation systems just make themselves irrelevant, right? Nobody is sitting there debating, oh, should I call Ryan back and help with that client pitch he's generating? Or should I work with Ivan to expand an existing client relationship? Which one is better for my bonus this year? If you have partners who are doing that mental calculus, your comp system is broken. So what we're really trying to do is get those reward structures so that they are helping to celebrate the right people. You've got a process in place where people can focus their attention in the right direction, but you're not trying to engineer it and pull the puppet strings all the time through micromanagement of the KPIs. Collaboration skills and confidence is one that sometimes people flat out say, I don't know how to do this. I hesitate because I'm not great at leading one of these initiatives, or I'm concerned about how I'm going to take it forward. More often than not, though, what we find is people are lacking collaboration skills because they'll say things like, my client doesn't want me to do this. Okay, maybe that's true if you're serving one of those unstrategic clients that wants to keep you in a vendor box. But by and large, we hear it from far too many service providers that they don't understand how to have strategic conversations with their clients. There's then two kinds of trust that we hear stand in the way. One is competence trust. Clearly, you're not going to bring me in to serve clients with you if you don't believe that I deliver super high quality work on time and on budget. But there's the interpersonal trust, which can sneak in. That might be you believe that somebody knows their stuff, but they're a jerk to work with. They steal credit, they undermine the relationship, they do all that kind of jerk stuff. And both competence and interpersonal trust, if they're lacking, could be barriers. we sometimes know that just knowing who knows what is really problematic. We're working with a couple of organizations right now that are in post-merger situations, and people literally don't know what the firm can offer now that they've grown as fast as they have. So figuring that out is crucial. And then, people seem to have cracked the remote and hybrid working. Yeah, it's a bit of a barrier not seeing people when you need to, not having those serendipitous encounters, but by and large, we're not seeing that as a huge hindrance any longer.
Yeah. So the time pressure one is particularly interesting to me because there's a short-term and long-term component to this. We know that developing collaborative relationships internally and with clients and building some of these skills takes time and effort, right? There is an upfront investment in doing what we're talking about here, even creating that kind of comfortable team environment where you can have, rigorous challenge and debate. So there is an upfront investment in doing this, but we also know that it becomes easier. People become more effective at it. And over time, it becomes more efficient, as we talked about on the prior slide. And so this time pressure and inefficiency thing we find is generally a short-term issue. But when teams and individuals make the investment in operating in this way, it becomes far more efficient and far more impactful down the line.
We have a question here. It's not called out specifically, but I think it would cut across a lot of the barriers that are highlighted, and it's this mentality, this innate resistance to collaborate, whether this is my patch or this is my client, this type of attitude where people aren't really open and willing to. So how do you overcome people with that type of ingrained mindset? Is there an approach there, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it first starts with an understanding of why it is that they're operating in the quote unquote my client patch. We do a skill will assessment. So are they doing that because they literally don't know how to engage the client in business opportunities? Because if they're whatever, an employment lawyer or a technology implementation specialist in a big four, and they go in and they only talk to the employment specialist, they only talk to somebody who deals in, this sort of ERP system. No wonder they think that the client doesn't need anything else. They're entirely too siloed and narrow and self-centered in those conversations that they're having. So is it a skill issue that they don't know how to open up those conversations, or is it a will issue? They could do it, but they're unwilling to because they want to keep the client relationship to themselves so that they can use it as a negotiating tactic for a bigger raise and threaten to leave with that client? Is it because they don't have confidence in other people's ability to deliver? Like, what's underlying their reluctance to operate like that? Sometimes it is people, being scared of stepping too far outside their comfort zone. Right? And for those individuals, there's a really different path forward than people who are egregious in their behavior.
And this is where incentive systems often get in the way as well. When we see organizations that have very individually oriented performance targets, that can be a real barrier to collaboration. Heidi and I wrote an article in Harvard Business Review last year called Performance Management Shouldn't Kill Collaboration. And it really talks about how you set up targets and metrics that have individual goals, because individual accountability is important, but also has a balance of shared team and organizational level targets and metrics, so that you're trying to create an environment where people are motivated and incented to, first of all, collaborate, but secondly, really do what's in the best interests of the client. Yeah, and I love, Ryan, when I hear people say things like my client, right? I'd rather hear people talk about the fact that they are a steward of the client for the firm, right? These are the firm's clients. And when you're building out these relationships and you're getting multiple service lines into the organization, then you really do start to institutionalize that client, and you start to move away from this sense of my client or your client.
And I think that's something that is quite dear to my heart, that concept of my client. And I think with advent of technology, this idea of the little black book on the desk, and I think certainly us three and maybe others on the call, I used to remember the Rolodex on the desk days. But with the digitization, if you will, of the black book, that opens up those relationships firm wide. And I think that's part of the breakthrough of technology. And it helps to crack that nut of my client, because if others are aware that those relationships exist, I think that is just a catalyst that sometimes people need to break that mindset. So I think on that note, it would be interesting now to look at some of the specifics on barriers to collaboration. I know you had a couple of specific case studies to talk to, at least examples.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's pivot to one which we referenced earlier, which is lateral hires. Almost all of the professional service firms that we're working with, but most clients across industries are very focused on bringing in senior expertise that can move the ball forward on their strategy. It might be bringing in people who can open up a new market segment or have particular skills like cloud services in the consulting industry, and firms are investing enormous time and effort, both leadership time in the recruiting process to bring these talented, experienced hires in, but also real financial investment in the compensation that they're paying for this talent. The challenge is that the outcomes are not great. Heidi and I wrote a chapter on the causes of some of this underperformance in lateral hires. And what we see are some pretty shocking stats. 28% of these experienced hires, only 28% of them hit their client billings in the first year. There's a real ramp up time in this. 20% of them leave within the first year, and fully 50% of them leave within 5 years. And that type of derailing and that level of attrition within an organization can have a massive impact on multiple levels. Obviously, there's a real financial impact in the money that was spent to recruit and pay these people and the time within the organization. It can also have a real internal impact on the culture, because you bring in these stars and then they leave shortly afterwards. The organization's looking around going, what's happening? And it can have a client impact too. You're introducing these people, these senior executives to the client base, and then they stay only for a year or two, and the clients are questioning what's happening with the strategy, what's happening with your ability to retain these people. Fortunately, there are some real ways to address this, and we outline that in the chapter. The first is around really laying a foundation before the hiring starts. And this means a couple of things. You'd be shocked, Ryan, at how often there is no real business case, no clear business case for why an executive is being recruited. What are they expected to deliver? What market are they expected to open? What metrics is the organization putting around the expectations so that it can be effectively monitored? So that establishing a business case for why this hire is critical is important. Communicating that business case internally so that the organization and their peers know why this person is coming in and why it's good for them as well as the organization is also important. And then having real sponsorship is critical. There needs to be someone who is accountable for the success of this person. And we're actually working with a very big consulting firm today, which is having a big challenge specifically in this area because they're bringing in lots of these lateral hires and nobody is responsible for really making sure that they are getting integrated and are ultimately successful. They're sort of left to their own devices once they get in and hit the ground, and it's causing real challenges for them. The second is key strategy is building the concepts of smarter collaboration into the recruiting and interviewing process with a good behavioral-based interviewing program, you can really identify people who have a track record of collaborating, and who have demonstrated through their behaviors and through their successes in their career that they've been able to drive business development, for example, in a collaborative way. And if you don't see that, if you see that this person is a rainmaker who is doing everything themselves, then you really may question, what is the likelihood of them being successful in this organization, and of also embedding those clients and really institutionalizing those clients into the new organization. And then the third is really integrating them after they get hired. And that requires a couple of things. That requires the sponsorship that I mentioned earlier. And that sponsor needs to do a couple of things. Is, first of all, bringing them into multiple deals, right? Bringing them in and introducing them to the existing clients to help them get a feel for the culture, the services that are being offered, how the firm operates, and start to build a network out of the existing client base. You want them working with partners across the firm, assuming that this is a partner coming in to a professional service firm. You want them working with partners across geographies, across offering areas, so that they are starting to build out the network that's critical for their longer term success. And then lastly, you need to track progress. You need to have those metrics that I talked about earlier so that you can use data, and we should come on to this a little bit, Ryan, but you can use data to monitor and get some leading indicators of whether they're really getting stuck in. How many people are they working with? How many clients are they engaged with, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that the data piece is an interesting aspect to explore further. And we talked about how technology can solve that. People may be familiar with the whole concept of organizational network analysis. This is the whole idea of understanding that networking and visualization, and really being able to then have some type of tangible insight into who people are actually engaging with, and that can be sliced and diced by different departments, different teams, different genders, different job levels. All of that data is available, and one client in particular, and others as well, where they have done some really advanced work on this, where creating these early warning signs for lateral hires that are coming in and maybe finding it difficult to navigate their way in the organization. And these sad stats are quite depressing, no doubt, but on the other side of the coin, the impact of a very successful lateral hire must be hugely significant. Their stats aren't there, but I'm guessing that the business case is very solid. So if you can maximize the probability of making them successful, then the impact is going to be felt, the top and bottom line there. So I think with the technology solutions that are available there, certainly ones we're working with clients on, that are able to then bring that sort of tangible insight into how people are integrating, people with good networks being identified early on for potential promotions. A lot of professional services firms and firms in general are taking candidates from non-traditional channels, if you will. Mm-hmm. So how are those people integrating themselves into the firm and being able to offer that sort of white glove service to support people and make them happy? Make back to the slide previously, 40% of people being more comfortable at work, collaborating, and obviously all of this fits together to being an all-round much more compelling proposition for the individual and the client, and obviously the company themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's obviously at a lateral hiring level, and that can be considered at an individual. But if this is done at a corporate level, that's obviously what you're evangelizing here. This needs to be thought through. How is that being done? That's a compelling case. But I think from a strictly corporate perspective and an organizational perspective, we have got a question about this. I was holding it back because I knew this was coming, on mergers and acquisitions. So that's collaboration at a hugely different scale. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how we tackle that and the potential obstacles. And I'm sure the people on this call, we've got hundreds of people on the call, we've all experienced when things go wrong. So maybe we can figure out the warning signs and navigate our firms in the right direction going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, let's just start with the idea that most theses underlying a merger are actually smart collaboration, right? Why do you bring two entities together? It's because you believe that when you combine them, they can provide better service, more sophisticated joined up solutions, and they're going to make more money. You know, the days of doing acquisitions just to slam them together and strip costs out of the back end are pretty pretty much bygone days, right? So beyond financial engineering, the merger thesis is almost always smarter collaboration. How are we going to bring these two previously distinct entities together and get them to produce more sophisticated high-end results or more value add than any of them could do on their own? So we've had quite a lot of experience with organizations that have gotten reasonably far down the track of considering a merger and then step back to say, is this, is our target partner somebody that we could actually build the future together and build the business together? We get involved sometimes at that pre-merger stage. A lot of times it's in the immediate aftermath. Okay, we've joined up technically. We've, designed the logo. We've got people believing that they're part of one firm, but they're really not acting like that. What do we need to do? So some of the pro tips for laying the foundations, assessing the firm's organizational health and conducting this due diligence is absolutely essential. And building internal support pre-merger for how people are going to engage. What we see is a failure here is providing individual leaders and sometimes down to actual individual partners or workers inside the firm. What is this new world going to look like for them, and how are they going to change the way they operate? How do they start thinking about laying foundations for the post-merger world, so you're not beginning from a standing start, but rather hit the ground running. So building collaboration and the ideas for collaboration, taking a hard look in the mirror and making sure you're really ready for that kind of post-merger integration is absolutely essential. Selecting the right collaborative talent is crucial as well. Elevating and advancing people who truly excel at collaboration. Working with one firm right now, it's private equity backed. They have gone through 8 successive mergers in a relatively short period of time. And what they are finding is a painful truth right now. People who were good leaders and strong performers and delivered great results in much smaller organizations that were far more focused are failing to deliver the growth objectives in this new, more complex post-merger world. And they've failed to elevate and advance the employees who have the skills to operate at that level. So using collaboration, people's track record, people's ability to collaborate as one of the key criteria for determining who should be leaders in the next firm once it's joined up is essential. Figuring where even after you join up, you're going to have some gaps, and making plans to fill those. Most of those are going to be capability gaps, and assessing where people are going to struggle to operate in a bigger, more complex environment. Sometimes it means operating across cultural divides as well. I mean, we see in the US right now, we're seeing the US and UK, a lot of transatlantic mergers happening. And people make the radically mistaken assumption that because you more or less speak the same language, that you're going to be able to come together culturally pretty smoothly. And we've seen this fall down again and again. I think Ivan and I both have British and US passports. We've lived in both countries and moved back and forth many, many times in the last couple of decades. So we appreciate some of the cultural nuances there, and have helped people work through where the collaboration barriers are coming up because they don't appreciate how different the approach to work is. And being really explicit about what you expect from people is part of selecting that collaborative talent. Once you've got the organization, sorry, Ivan, did you want to jump in there?
I was just going to say there's some real signaling that can go on here as well. Inevitably, when you have a merger, unless the company being acquired is very tiny. There's a leadership decision process going on about who's going to lead, various business units or functional areas. And there's an opportunity to signal to the organization what is important and the importance of collaboration in particular by, as Heidi said, by selecting people who post-merger will demonstrate a real capability and motivation to collaborate across both of those organizations. And I do want to come back to, after we go through the next piece, Heidi, some of the ways that data and technology can help identify where those collaborations need to happen, particularly in an M&A context.
Yeah, absolutely. So, once you've got people in the same organization, ostensibly, how do you get them to really behave like that? Getting people collaborating deeply and broadly enough in the first year is really essential. We've seen some creative ways that leaders have done this through sort of gamifying what it looks like to engage with people. So, in one firm where there was a big tie-up, the leaders put out this system where, if you had coffee with somebody from the other legacy firm, you'd get a point. If you took somebody along to a client, you'd get 50 points. And what we found really amusing about this is how engaged people were. They were dead set on getting points like this, and it kind of forced them into having some of this outreach and in a really fun way help them build some relationships and do the outreach that, maybe they wouldn't have been as motivated before. And if you think, God, that sounds really expensive because at the end, surely we're going to need to give somebody, a new, Porsche 911 in order to reward this. No, not at all. What was very charming about this is the winners of this contest in the post-merger situation, they ended up getting something like, Apple Watches, right? So it's not the value of the prize per se, it's the fact that they had actually gone to this effort, and they were able in this firm to track then on a serious note how much business they actually generated across the legacy firms, and they proved out their merger thesis really, really fast. Getting those near-term wins and celebrating them, talking about those successes. It doesn't have to be landing a new contract. It can be, taking clients out to lunch with 4 people, each representing different parts of the business. That can count as a win.
And just a nuance on that. The wins that get celebrated should be collaborative wins that demonstrate the collaboration happening across the organizations. There's always going to be individual wins where somebody, does something great as an individual, and those heroes are important. But in this context, you really want to talk about where you're seeing those bright spots of collaboration happen.
100%.
Yeah, and I would just give an example here of my exposure in my Introhive hat on the context of the clients I look after, large global corporations that are acquiring smaller but still sizable, multi or tens of $1 million a year revenue firms. And you talk about the business case, and often the business case in that scenario is when we acquire this specific company that might have a very specific consulting offering or a certain type of service or product that serves their clients. The business case is predicated on when we buy this firm, we can sell their services to our clients. Yeah. And they create some theoretical numbers that make sense to make the acquisition, and hey presto, that happens. And what one client in particular I'm thinking about is that the follow through of that was very difficult, because you're taking a typically smaller firm into a big conglomerate, and it's very tough for them to navigate their way around. And one way we found to solve that and deliver tangible results was again back to the typical buying persona. And one client I'm thinking about, they bought a test automation firm, and they wanted to speak to heads of testing, and it was very simple. And it's a simple solution, but if you're able to identify where there are relationships with the heads of testing within specific clients, and then you're able to talk to the person internally that has that relationship, that's a catalyst to introduce yourself and explain, because maybe they aren't even aware that your parent company purchased that small firm, and it's obviously a catalyst around a client, and then that proved to be very successful. So that was just a simple example that can cut through some of that noise and risk attached to those types of acquisitions.
I love that example, Ryan. And there's an obvious information asymmetry when you have two organizations coming together. Typically the top of the house in both organizations will get to know each other very well. They'll learn each other's expertise. They'll have spent time together during the due diligence and negotiation processes. So, the top of the house of the organizations know each other well. How do you get down through the organization, get people collaborating, especially when you've got large organizations, right? You're not going to get everybody meeting each other, right? So you have to have some scalable way of sharing information, to your point about where expertise lies, where client relationships exist, and have an ability to facilitate those kinds of communications. And technology can play a really important role there.
Yeah, fascinating. And look, we are quite close to time. I think we've done a good job there. We did say we'd take questions throughout, but I think we can draw this to a close. I worked through most of the questions. I think we combined a few of them, so we got there in the end. What I'll say is, and I think this goes for Heidi and Ivan, and I started this session off by talking about how much this subject means to me. Very, very happy to have people reach out directly, connect on LinkedIn. I know Heidi and Ivan have their own channels as well, but very pleased to have hosted everybody today. And I'll hand the last word over to Heidi and Ivan just to conclude.
Absolutely. We would be delighted to connect with you and carry on these conversations. So please do stay in touch.
And thank you for having us.